He missed his flight to help a crying bride. The next morning she walked into his office. Final boarding for Flight 271 to Dallas. The announcement echoed through Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Gate C-12 was about to close. Mason Walker adjusted the strap of his laptop bag and broke into a jog, rolling his suitcase behind him. He checked his watch. 6:10 a.m. If he made it through the gate in the next minute, he would still arrive in Dallas before noon, just in time to finalize Crescent Urban Design Group's biggest commercial contract of the year. His phone buzzed. "Richard, don't miss this flight." Mason typed a quick reply. "I won't." Then he heard someone crying. Not quietly, not the kind of tears people tried to hide in airports every day. These sounded as if someone's entire future had collapsed. He slowed instinctively. Near the floor-to-ceiling windows sat a young woman in a wedding dress. Her bouquet rested beside her like something she no longer wanted to touch. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. One heel had already been kicked off. She stared at her phone without blinking. On the screen was a photograph. A man in a tuxedo, kissing another woman, not a stranger. Someone close enough that they were smiling into the camera as though they belonged together. The airport employee called again. "Sir, last boarding." Mason looked toward gate C-12, then at his watch, then back at the woman. She wasn't simply crying. She looked completely alone. He turned away from the gate. Behind him, the boarding door closed. Her name was Olivia Reed, 26 years old, an interior designer. Less than an hour earlier, she had been standing in front of a mirror while bridesmaids searched everywhere for her missing phone. She had gone back to the bridal suite to find it. Instead, she found her fiancé, his lips on another woman's. Not just any woman, Emily Carter, her college classmate, the woman who had helped choose the flowers, the woman who had hugged her only 30 minutes before the ceremony. Neither of them saw Olivia standing in the doorway. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She quietly slipped the engagement ring from her finger, placed it on the dressing table, walked out of the church, and kept driving until she reached the airport. She hadn't bought a ticket. She wasn't planning to fly anywhere. She just couldn't bear to stay where every hallway reminded her of what she'd lost. Or perhaps, what she'd never truly had. The affair hadn't begun yesterday. Messages, photos, hotel reservations. There had been months of lies. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the horrible realization that everyone seemed surprised she had finally found out. Not that it had happened. Everyone, except her. Mason stood a respectful distance away. He wasn't sure whether to leave, or ask if she needed help. Before he could decide, Olivia dropped her phone. It slid across the polished floor. He picked it up and handed it back without looking at the screen. "I think this belongs to you." She accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you." Her voice was barely audible. Neither of them spoke again. 5 long minutes passed. Passengers hurried around them. Families reunited. Children laughed. Announcements continued. Life moved forward. Olivia remained exactly where she was. Eventually Mason sat in the empty chair beside her. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't tell her everything would be okay. Some pain was too new for those words. Instead, he quietly bought 2 cups of coffee from the kiosk across the hall. He placed one beside her. "You don't have to drink it." She looked at the paper cup. "Thank you." Another silence settled between them. This one felt less lonely. At some point Olivia wiped her eyes, reached toward the seat beside Mason, and absent-mindedly grabbed what she thought was a tissue. She blew her nose, folded it, then slipped it into the pocket of her wedding dress without thinking. 10 minutes later, Mason cleared his throat. "I think," she looked at him, "you accidentally stole my handkerchief." Olivia blinked. "What?" He nodded toward her pocket. She reached inside. A neatly folded navy blue handkerchief stared back at her. "Oh." Her face immediately turned crimson. "I'm so sorry. I genuinely thought it was a tissue." "I noticed." She buried her face in both hands. "This might actually be the most embarrassing thing that's happened today." Mason raised one eyebrow. "Given the dress, that's statistically unlikely." For the first time all morning, Olivia laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, more like something cracked open through the grief. But it was real. The airport cafe had just started serving breakfast. Mason stood. "Come on." She looked up. I'm not really hungry. I didn't ask if you were. You look like someone who's forgotten food exists. She hesitated. You missed your flight. I did. You don't even know me. No. Then why are you doing this? He simply pulled out a chair across from her after they found a quiet table near the window. He ordered pancakes for her, eggs for himself. Neither of them touched the food immediately. For almost an hour, Mason never asked about the wedding, never criticized the man who had betrayed her, never offered inspirational speeches. He just stayed. Sometimes that was enough. Eventually, Olivia wrapped both hands around her coffee. She looked at him carefully. Why would you do that? Mason stared out the cafe window for several seconds before answering. A distant sadness crossed his face. Because someone once stayed, his voice was calm, when I needed them, and I never forgot what that felt like. The next morning, Olivia stood outside Crescent Urban Design Group, wearing the only navy blazer she owned. The wedding dress was gone. So were the flowers, the engagement ring, the carefully planned future. Only the faint shadows beneath her eyes remained. She had almost canceled the interview 3 different times during the drive. But rent still needed to be paid. Life had refused to pause simply because her heart had. She took a slow breath and stepped inside. The lobby was everything she expected from one of Charlotte's top design firms. Glass walls, warm wood finishes, carefully chosen furniture, and enough natural light to make every corner feel intentional. At reception, she received a temporary visitor badge. Olivia Reed Interview, Conference Room 7. She followed the hallway signs, rehearsing answers in her head. Tell us about yourself. Describe a challenging project. Why Crescent? She reached for the conference room door, at exactly the same moment. The door opened from the inside. Mason Walker walked out carrying a stack of project folders. They froze. For a full 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. You, Olivia finally managed. You, Mason echoed. A cheerful HR manager looked back and forth between them. You two know each other? Both answered at exactly the same time. Unfortunately, the HR manager blinked. Interesting. Olivia closed her eyes for half a second. I can explain. So can I, Mason said. Please don't. I wasn't planning to. The HR manager laughed. I suddenly have several questions. You'll receive none of the answers, Mason replied. That somehow made her laugh even harder. Thankfully, the awkwardness ended there. Mason wasn't one of the interviewers. As director of operations, he worked closely with project teams, but recruitment decisions belonged entirely to human resources and the design board. He wasn't allowed to sit on hiring panels for candidates who might later report through his department, which meant he had absolutely no influence over Olivia's interview. He gave her one small nod before leaving. Good luck. She nodded back. Thanks. That was all. No special treatment. No secret conversation. The interview lasted nearly 90 minutes. Olivia discussed residential renovations, adaptive reuse projects, sustainable materials, and the community center she had redesigned during graduate school. She answered every technical question calmly. By the end, she almost forgot everything that had happened the previous day. Almost. 3 days later, her phone rang. We'd like to offer you the position. Olivia stared silently at the apartment wall before finally smiling. She had done it. Not because someone knew her, because she had earned it. Her first week at Crescent passed more smoothly than she expected. Mason treated her exactly as he treated everyone else. Professional, polite and brief. If they crossed paths in the hallway, he greeted her with a simple, morning, nothing more. If she asked a work question, he answered it clearly. Nothing less. It was strangely comforting. After everything that had happened with her ex-fiancé, predictability felt safe. Still, Olivia kept a careful distance. She ate lunch alone, declined invitations after work, left exactly on time. Trust, she had decided, was an expensive investment, one she wasn't prepared to make again. About 2 weeks later, the whispers began. Olivia noticed conversations stopping whenever she entered the break room. Someone lowered their voice as she walked past. Airport. Already knew him. That's why she got hired. She pretended not to hear. But pretending didn't stop it from spreading. By Friday afternoon, almost everyone in the design department had heard some version of the story. Olivia wasn't talented. She was connected. Olivia had somehow charmed the director of operations before her interview. The promotion track had already been arranged. She worked late that evening, long after most employees had gone home. Olivia wasn't trying to prove the rumors wrong. She was trying to convince herself they didn't matter. Unfortunately, they did. Monday morning, Mason walked into the executive meeting carrying a single folder. "I have a request." The HR director looked up. "What is it?" "Release the recruitment evaluation." Silence. Richard, the company's founder, frowned. "Why?" "Because people are questioning the integrity of the hiring process. The scores are confidential. They don't have to include interviewer names. They only need to include the final rankings." Richard studied him carefully. "You realize this may embarrass some applicants." "It may, but it'll protect the company." After several minutes of discussion, the board agreed. That afternoon, the complete recruitment results were published internally. Anonymous interviewer scores, technical assessments, portfolio evaluations, final rankings. Olivia Reed, overall rank, #1, highest portfolio score, highest design presentation, highest technical evaluation. The rumors disappeared almost overnight. Late that afternoon, Olivia found Mason standing alone in the company cafe, waiting for his usual black coffee. She walked over. "You did that. I requested it. You didn't have to. I know." She searched his expression. "Weren't you worried people would think you were defending me?" He accepted his coffee before answering. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending the process." A small smile appeared on Olivia's face. Most people she had known would have tried to protect her feelings, or protect themselves. Mason had chosen something different. Fairness. Even if it meant inviting more attention to himself. For the first time since the wedding, Olivia found herself looking at a man and wondering not whether he liked her, but whether people like him had existed all along, quietly doing the right thing, even when nobody was watching. Working with Mason turned out to be surprisingly easy. Working around him, that was much harder. As director of operations, he floated between departments, solving problems before they became disasters. Some mornings he appeared in Olivia's design studio to review project timelines. Other afternoons he was helping construction managers resolve site issues across the city. He was always moving, always organized, always carrying the same leather notebook. Olivia quickly noticed something unusual. No one seemed nervous when Mason walked into a room. They simply worked a little better. He never raised his voice, never embarrassed anyone, never took credit for someone else's idea. He simply expected people to do their best. And somehow, they usually did. Several weeks later, Olivia and Mason were assigned to the same mixed-use renovation proposal. It wasn't glamorous. An old textile warehouse was being converted into offices and cafes. Most days were spent reviewing drawings, adjusting layouts, and arguing over lighting plans. "You moved my staircase," Olivia said one afternoon. "It violated accessibility requirements." "It was beautiful. It was illegal." She sighed dramatically. "You always ruin my artistic moments." "I prefer to think of it as preventing lawsuits." Despite herself, she smiled. Working late gradually became routine. Sometimes they ordered takeout. Sometimes they survived on vending machine snacks and too much coffee. One Thursday evening, Olivia placed the finished presentation model on the conference table. "Don't touch anything," she warned. "It's taken me 3 days. I wasn't planning to." She turned away for exactly 3 seconds. Mason reached across the table to grab a roll of tracing paper. His sleeve caught the corner of the model. A delicate staircase snapped cleanly off. Both of them stared in horror. Olivia slowly closed her eyes. "You touched something." "I did. My tiny staircase. Had dreams. I sincerely apologized to the staircase. It accepted your apology." "It did?" "No, but I appreciate the effort." Mason loosened his tie. "I'll fix it. You don't know how. I'll learn." They stayed in the office until nearly midnight. Mason carefully glued tiny wooden pieces back together, while Olivia repainted damaged sections. When they finally finished, the repaired staircase looked almost perfect. "Not bad," Olivia admitted. "I can follow instructions." "There it is." "What?" "Your favorite personality trait. It has served me well. It also explains why you alphabetize your coffee mugs." "I don't alphabetize them. She looked impressed. So there is chaos in your life. They're arranged by size. That's somehow worse. As the weeks passed, Olivia noticed something she couldn't ignore. Mason always arrived exactly when he said he would. If he promised a phone call at 6, her phone rang at 6. If he said he'd review her drawings before lunch, the comments arrived before noon. If he told a client he'd be on site Tuesday morning, he was already there when everyone else arrived. At first, Olivia thought it was coincidence, then habit. Eventually, she started expecting it. Without realizing it, she also started checking. If Mason texted, "running 15 minutes late," she glanced at the office clock. 14 minutes and 59 seconds. He walked through the door. One afternoon, he caught her looking from her phone to the hallway just before he arrived. "You know," he said casually, "you don't have to verify my calendar." Olivia looked up too quickly. "I'm not." He raised an eyebrow. She hesitated before admitting, "I'm verifying reality." For a moment, Mason didn't answer. Then he smiled. "I suppose that's fair." It wasn't a joke. He understood exactly what she meant. One Saturday afternoon, Olivia stopped by a downtown bookstore after meeting a supplier. She was halfway through the architecture section when someone spoke behind her. "Olivia?" She turned. Emily, the same woman who had kissed her fiancé on her wedding day. Emily looked uncomfortable. "I didn't know you still lived in Charlotte." "I do." Silence stretched between them. Emily finally sighed. "I'm sorry." Olivia didn't answer. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "No, we never wanted you to find out that way." Olivia stared at her. The words landed harder than the apology. "Find out?" Emily looked away. I thought you'd already suspected." Olivia felt the floor shift beneath her. Emily spoke quietly. "You should have seen it coming." Olivia left without another word. That evening, she drove aimlessly through Charlotte. When she finally stopped, she realized she was parked outside Crescent's office. Most of the building was dark. Only one floor still had lights on. Mason's. He looked surprised when she knocked. "I thought everyone had gone home." "So did I." He immediately noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" Olivia tried to answer. Nothing came out. Instead, tears did. Mason silently handed her a chair, then another cup of coffee. Neither of them touched it. After several minutes, Olivia finally spoke. "I saw her." He didn't ask who. "The woman he cheated with." She laughed once. It sounded painfully empty. She apologized. Mason remained quiet. Then she said something. Olivia stared at the untouched coffee. "You should have seen it coming." She swallowed hard. "I keep thinking about those words. What if everyone did see it? What if I was the only idiot in the room?" Mason leaned forward. "I don't think you were an idiot. I think you trusted someone who asked to be trusted." She shook her head. "I keep wondering what else I missed. What if I never know when someone's lying again?" For the first time, she told him everything. About finding the phone. Walking into the bridal suite, the ring left behind on the dressing table, driving until she reached the airport because she couldn't breathe inside the church anymore. When she finished, the room felt strangely lighter, not because the pain had disappeared, because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Neither of them noticed how close they had moved. Olivia looked up. Mason was only inches away. Neither spoke. He slowly reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. She didn't move. Their eyes met. The silence felt different now. Gentler, hopeful. Mason leaned in carefully, giving her every chance to step away. For one heartbeat, she almost closed the distance. Instead, Olivia took a small step backward. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to trust someone again." Mason nodded slowly. There was no disappointment in his expression, no frustration, no attempt to persuade her. He simply smiled. "You don't have to decide today." Those 6 words settled somewhere deep inside her. For the first time since the wedding, someone wasn't asking her for certainty. They were giving her time. Spring arrived quietly in Charlotte. Without either of them noticing exactly when it happened, working together stopped feeling like work. Lunch became routine. Coffee somehow appeared on Olivia's desk every Tuesday morning. A vanilla latte, never ordered, always appreciated. She eventually stopped asking how Mason remembered her favorite drink. He simply did. Some evenings they walked to the parking garage together. Other nights they stayed late reviewing presentations until the cleaning staff gently reminded them the building was closing. Neither of them ever called it dating. Neither of them needed to. Somewhere between project deadlines and shared coffees, they had become the first person each looked for at the beginning of every day. One Friday afternoon, Olivia burst into Mason's office carrying a large envelope. "I got it." Mason looked up from his laptop. "You got?" She practically threw the letter onto his desk. He opened it, then smiled. A real smile. "The Amsterdam Design Fellowship. 6 months." She nodded, almost unable to breathe. "I actually got it." He stood immediately. Without thinking, he wrapped her in a quick hug. "I'm proud of you." The words landed differently than congratulations, because she believed him. For a moment she simply stayed there. Then she quietly stepped back. "I haven't accepted it yet." Mason looked surprised. "Why not?" She didn't answer. "Not yet." A week later, Mason disappeared during lunch. When he returned, he carried a large shopping bag into the office. Unfortunately, half the design department saw him. So, one of the architects whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "When's the wedding?" Olivia nearly dropped her coffee. "What wedding?" Another coworker pointed toward the bag. "That definitely looks like jewelry." Mason looked genuinely confused. "It isn't." Someone grinned. "Oh, come on. We're happy for you." "I appreciate that." So, he opened the bag. Inside was a navy blue suitcase. Silence. Olivia blinked. "A suitcase? You'll need one for Amsterdam." The office erupted into laughter. One designer wiped tears from his eyes. "I've never seen a proposal fail so spectacularly." Mason looked around the room. "I wasn't proposing." A beat passed. Someone muttered, "Honestly, that's somehow even more romantic." Olivia laughed so hard she had to sit down. The suitcase remained unopened in her apartment for 3 days. Every time she looked at it, one question returned. Did she really want to leave, or was she simply afraid of staying? As the weeks passed, the distance between her and Mason continued disappearing. He learned she hummed quietly while concentrating. She learned he always loosened his tie exactly halfway through difficult meetings. He remembered her coffee. She remembered he hated raisins. He noticed when she was pretending to be okay. She noticed when he skipped lunch because he was overwhelmed. One rainy evening they shared a single umbrella walking back from a client meeting. Halfway across the street, a gust of wind flipped it inside out. They stared at the useless umbrella for 3 seconds. Then both burst into laughter. Completely soaked. Neither cared. For the first time in years, Olivia realized she wasn't waiting for happiness to disappear. She was simply happy. That frightened her more than anything. Then came Thursday. Olivia finished work early and decided to surprise Mason with coffee before his final client meeting. She walked into a quiet Italian restaurant across from the office, then stopped. Mason sat near the window. Across from him, a beautiful woman about his age. Elegant, confident. She reached across the table, touched his hand. Olivia's chest tightened. She couldn't hear the conversation. She didn't wait to. The coffee in her hand suddenly felt ridiculous. She quietly turned around and walked back outside. The familiar ache returned so quickly it stole her breath. Not again. Please, not again. The next morning Mason found her unusually distant. She answered questions politely, avoided eye contact, left meetings the moment they ended. By lunch he finally asked, "Did I do something?" Olivia hesitated. "No. You've said exactly 12 words to me today." "I counted." She sighed. "I saw you last night." His forehead creased. "The restaurant." With understanding crossed his face almost instantly. "Oh," he laughed. Actually laughed. Olivia frowned. "What's funny?" "I finally know why Linda looked so confused when you disappeared." "You saw me?" She asked whether she'd accidentally scared away one of my coworkers. Olivia blinked. "Linda?" "My mentor. And our biggest client. The woman who convinced Crescent to hire me 10 years ago." He smiled. "She's also the reason I know how to negotiate contracts without insulting everyone involved." Olivia felt every ounce of tension leave her body. "I thought." "I know." She looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." You don't owe me an apology. Yes, I do. No. He spoke gently. You reacted because someone else taught you to expect betrayal. That wasn't your fault. His words settled quietly between them. For the first time, Olivia realized she hadn't been doubting Mason. She had been doubting the possibility that anyone could actually be different. A week later, she finally made her decision. She found Mason on the rooftop terrace after work. The acceptance form rested inside her bag. I got the final deadline. He nodded. When do you leave? If I go, in 3 weeks. Silence drifted between them. Olivia stared across the Charlotte skyline. Then whispered, I finally trust someone. Her voice trembled. And now I have to leave. Mason looked at her for a long moment. She had already made her choice. She just wanted someone to tell her she didn't have to. Instead, he stepped closer. If you stay because of me, you'll regret me. She looked up. I won't. You will. He smiled sadly. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But one day you'll wonder who you could have become. He gently placed the Amsterdam acceptance letter back into her hands. Go. She blinked. What? Go. I'll still be here. No promises. No dramatic declarations. Just quiet certainty. For the first time in Olivia's life, a man who loved her wasn't asking her to give up part of herself to prove it. He was asking her to become even more of who she already was. And somehow, that made trusting him easier than staying ever could. 6 months later, autumn welcomed Olivia back to Charlotte with crisp air and streets painted in shades of amber. She didn't tell anyone she was coming home. Not Mason, not her former co-workers, not even Tessa, who had spent the previous month trying to guess her return date over video calls. Olivia wanted one quiet moment before the world found out she was back. Amsterdam had changed her. She had worked with architects from 12 countries, learned to trust her instincts instead of apologizing for them, presented projects to people whose opinions had once terrified her. For the first time in years, she no longer introduced herself by what she had lost. She introduced herself by what she created. Still, there was one question she had carried across the Atlantic. Was Mason still waiting, or had life simply continued without her? She stopped outside Crescent Urban Design just after 9 in the morning. The receptionist looked up in surprise. Olivia? She smiled. Hi, Grace. When did you get back? About 20 minutes ago. Grace laughed. He's going to be very happy. Olivia tried to sound casual. Is Mason in? Grace's smile faded ever so slightly. He isn't here. A small knot formed in Olivia's stomach. Oh, he left Crescent 3 months ago. She blinked. What? He started his own operations consulting firm. He still works with us sometimes. But this isn't his office anymore. For one long second, Olivia wondered if she had come back too late. Grace noticed the panic on her face. Oh, don't worry. He'll be here around 10. He has a meeting with Richard. Relief arrived so quickly that Olivia almost laughed. Would you like to wait? She nodded. Mason's former office now belonged to someone else, but his old desk had been moved into a shared conference room while renovations were underway. Grace pointed toward it. He still leaves things there whenever he's visiting. Olivia stepped inside. The room was empty. Sunlight stretched across the wooden desk. There, lying neatly beside a closed notebook, was an old boarding pass. Flight 271, Charlotte to Dallas, the same flight he had never boarded. Beside it rested a carefully folded navy blue handkerchief. Her cheeks warmed immediately. She still remembered accidentally stealing it. Next to both sat a vanilla latte, still warm, as though someone had bought it only minutes earlier. Underneath the coffee cup was a handwritten note. Still glad I missed it. Olivia gently picked up the boarding pass. The edges were worn from being unfolded countless times. She smiled through unexpected tears. You always were impossible to understand. You could have just asked. She turned. Mason stood quietly in the doorway. Exactly on time. Just as always. He smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. Neither of them moved for several seconds. Then Mason walked over. So, how was Amsterdam? She laughed softly. I learned Dutch. I'm sorry. I learned to stop apologizing. I'm less sorry. And I missed Charlotte. His eyes met hers. I noticed. She looked down at the boarding pass. You kept this. I keep all the important ones. Olivia frowned. There was only one. There were two. She looked confused. The one I never boarded, and the one you eventually did. Later that afternoon, they sat in the same airport cafe where everything had begun. Different season, different clothes. The same quiet corner by the window. Olivia wrapped both hands around her latte. I've been thinking about something. What? The morning at the airport. You never answered my question. What question? Why you stayed. Mason looked out toward the runway where another aircraft slowly lifted into the sky. My mother became sick while I was away on a business trip. His voice remained calm. So I booked the earliest flight home. Olivia stayed silent. I landed, but another delay kept us on the runway. They wouldn't let anyone off. When I finally reached the hospital, he paused. She was already gone. The words hung quietly between them. I kept replaying that morning for years. If I'd left one meeting earlier, if I'd booked a different flight, if I'd driven instead, I kept believing I could have changed the ending. He smiled sadly. Eventually I realized I couldn't. What haunted me wasn't that I couldn't save her. It was believing she spent her final moments feeling alone. Olivia felt tears gathering again. So after that, if someone truly needs me, I stay. He looked directly at her. Not because I think I can fix everything. I can't. But no one should ever believe they're facing the worst day of their life by themselves. Silence settled gently between them. For the first time, Olivia understood. The morning at Charlotte Douglas Airport, Mason hadn't seen a bride. He hadn't seen a beautiful stranger. He hadn't fallen in love at first sight. He had simply seen one lonely human being whose world had just fallen apart, and he refused to let her face that moment alone. Somewhere along the months that followed, kindness had quietly become friendship. Friendship had become trust, and trust had become love. Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. I spent 6 months trying to figure out when I fell in love with you. Mason smiled. Did you? She nodded. I think it was the moment I realized. You stayed before you had any reason to. And somehow, that became every reason. Life did not suddenly become simple. It simply became honest. Over the following weeks, Olivia settled back into Charlotte. She accepted a senior designer position at Crescent, this time leading several of the international concepts she had developed in Amsterdam. Mason's consulting firm slowly found its footing. Some weeks were busy, others were uncertain. Neither of them pretended adulthood suddenly came with guarantees. But every Friday evening, no matter how complicated the week had been, they met at the same airport cafe where everything had started. The staff eventually stopped asking for their order. 1 black coffee, 1 vanilla latte, always the same. One evening, Olivia laughed as she looked around. You know, what? I used to think airports only existed so people could leave. Mason smiled. And now, they're where people find each other. On a cool October afternoon, Mason called Olivia. I need your opinion, she laughed. On architecture? No, on something considerably more terrifying. Curious, she agreed to meet him. He didn't choose an expensive restaurant or a rooftop overlooking the skyline. Instead, he brought her back to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Specifically, Gate C12, the same gate, the same windows, the same row of seats where 6 months earlier, a heartbroken bride had believed her life was over. Passengers hurried past without noticing them. Announcements echoed through the terminal, exactly as they always had. Life continued, just as it had that morning. Mason reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He unfolded a familiar piece of paper, the old boarding pass, Flight 271, Charlotte to Dallas. He smiled as he looked at its worn edges. I carried this around for a long time. Olivia stepped beside him. So did I. He looked surprised. What? The memory. She gently touched the boarding pass. It traveled with me everywhere. Mason nodded, then spoke quietly. I missed a flight. Olivia smiled. You missed a wedding. He laughed softly. Turns out, both of us were heading to the wrong destination. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mason folded the boarding pass one final time and slipped it safely back into his wallet. Instead of another speech, he reached into his coat pocket. A small velvet box appeared. Olivia's eyes immediately filled with tears. I spent years believing life was something you carefully planned, Mason said. Then one delayed flight changed everything. I've learned that the best things in my life were never on my schedule. He opened the box. A simple platinum ring. Elegant, timeless. Just like her. I don't promise perfect days. I don't promise we won't miss flights or make mistakes. But I do promise you'll never have to wonder whether I'm staying. He took one slow breath. Olivia Reed, will you marry me? She laughed through tears. The kind of laugh that only arrives after surviving heartbreak. So, she whispered, where are we going now? Mason smiled. Anywhere. He reached for her hand. As long as it's together. Olivia nodded before he had even finished the sentence. Yes, definitely yes. Passengers nearby applauded. Someone cheered. A little girl whispered loudly to her mother, see, airports are romantic. Even Mason laughed at that. Several months later, on a warm spring afternoon, about 50 guests gathered inside a small historic chapel just outside Charlotte. There were no crystal chandeliers, no celebrity photographers, no extravagant flower walls, only family, close friends, co-workers, and the people who had quietly helped shape 2 lives. Grace from reception cried before the ceremony even started. Richard, despite pretending otherwise, kept wiping his glasses. The design team argued over who had the worst dance moves before the reception had even begun. Olivia waited with her father outside the chapel doors. He looked at her with misty eyes. You look happy. She smiled. I am. Not because this wedding was perfect, but because this time, she wasn't wondering whether the man waiting at the end of the aisle would choose her. She already knew. The music began. Her father squeezed her hand. You ready? She nodded. I've been ready for a while. Together they walked inside. Mason was already waiting. Not anxious. Just at her. Always at her. When the ceremony reached its final moments, the officiant smiled warmly at the guests. Is everyone here? Mason looked directly into Olivia's eyes, then answered before anyone else could. This time, he smiled. No one's leaving. Laughter mixed with quiet tears. Their vows were simple, honest. No dramatic promises, only everyday ones. To tell the truth and stay. To choose each other, especially on ordinary days. Long after the guests had gone home, the chapel stood quietly beneath the evening sky. Inside the reception hall, one small display rested beside the guest book, an old boarding pass. Carefully framed, beneath it, engraved on a simple brass plaque, were the words that had become the beginning of everything. Sometimes the best journey begins when you miss your flight. As Olivia and Mason discovered, love isn't always about finding the perfect person at the perfect time. Sometimes, it's about meeting someone who quietly stays when everyone else walks away. The greatest act of love isn't making impossible promises, it's keeping the ordinary ones, showing up, keeping your word, and making sure the person beside you never has to face their hardest day alone. So now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever missed out on something that later turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? Share your story in the comments. We read every one of them, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable journey. Until next time, take care of the people who stay. And if life ever causes you to miss a flight, don't rush to call it a mistake. It just might be leading you exactly where you're meant to be.